who are you? You're just a young dude
I
with
was
a day in the
a,
music business, and you're in it. And
well, I was an engineer at 1963. I was a house engineer at Sunset Sound Recorders. And I used to do a lot of recording with Jac and Jac's very good friend was, I just had a name on my tongue, he used to jump out of airplanes and manage...
Herbie Cohen.
Herbie Cohen, okay, thank you. Herbie Cohen brought Jac Holzman to me because Herbie Cohen, because Jac had called Herbie and said, Herbie, what are we recording in LA? We've got this band called Love and we need to record. We don't know where to go. And Herbie said without a beat, he said, go to Sunset Sound Recording. There's this kid there and do it with him. So I got this phone call from Jac Holzman and we met over the phone and then he said, we're bringing our own tape. I said, you're bringing your own tape? I said, yes, we're bringing our own tape. And when Jac showed up with Arthur Lee and Love, he showed up with these, I think, 6 or 8 reels of half-inch tape because we were recording 4-track in those days. And they were all stock that had been used before and bulk erased and spliced together because they were a small company, so they really couldn't afford to just keep going out and buying new tapes, so they'd use it over and over again. And I was a little surprised, but and I think I remember saying to Jac that I didn't trust it, and he said that since he was paying for it, it didn't matter, and if it went wrong, put on another piece of tape. So anyway, so Jac produced.
So here comes Jac. You physically see him. What is the physical Jac like to you at that point? Can you?
Jac was this real energetic guy from New York that hadn't made a rock and roll record before, and we were just on the cusp of the '60s rock and roll era, and Love was one of the first bands of that era, at least American bands. He came in and he really knew what he wanted. I was impressed, especially when putting the album together, that he said when we mix this down, that we do our timings by feel. We don't put a standard 3 seconds. And he was the first person in the industry to do that, to do the spreads by feel. And he was I think I remember, he was very personable, very nice. I didn't know much about him at all, except that we got on and liked the music, and it was a very fast and easy session. I think I remember taking Jac to dinner, I think the first or second night, over to Martoni's in Hollywood, which is infamous record business watering hole. And I don't remember what we had, but had a good dinner. I know he was impressed because I don't think he'd ever been there before, and that was right there on his list of Italian restaurants to haunt when he came to Los Angeles. I do remember that it went so well that he trusted me to mix the album down by myself, and he didn't know me, beyond what somebody had told him. And I mixed the first Love album by myself and then sent the masters back to New York, whereupon he did all the spreads and whatnot, and the album came out and it was a success. And I guess that he enjoyed the experience so much that I became, and Sunset Sound became, the West Coast place where Elektra would do all their recording, within the limitations of the size of the room. The next time I saw Jac was for the first Tim Buckley album. And that was the next record to be recorded, I believe. I'm pretty sure of it. Yes, because, if I'm not mistaken, I got Jac to do strings on that album. I have to go listen to it. But that's where I met Paul Rothschild for the first time. And this is where I started to know more about Jac, because Paul had just gotten out of jail from the bus that had been set up by the government. And then I found out how much Jac had done for Paul to get him out, and really stood by him. And because I didn't know the depth or anything about Elektra. I didn't know about the whole folk history and all the original things that got Jac on his Vespa, driving around. I'd hear the stories about that, and that he was distributing his own records, taking them around to various stores. He's still doing the same thing, actually. Paul produced the first Tim Buckley album, but I seem to remember that Jac was around for most of it. And somehow or another, I became friends with Jac. He took me under his New York wing, and I took him under my Hollywood wing, and we got on real well together. I get a lot of phone calls at home at night, and just chatting, and always impressed, that the president of this company, even though the Doors hadn't happened at that point in time, would take the time out to call up and whatnot. We went from that album into the Doors album, which Jac signed, and he was very personally involved, and he wanted Paul to be the producer and me to be the engineer. So Paul and I had shaken out our growing pains together, because Paul had very specific ways that he liked to work, and Jac would intercede in my behalf or Paul's behalf to smooth that out.
Talk about that a bit. Specific ways to work. What does that mean?
What?
What are these specific ways to work?
Well, Paul was used to recording in New York in very, primitive ways, and he had been used to using certain types of microphones, and I used different kinds of microphones and worked different ways. So Paul had to learn my style, is basically what it was, and then I had to learn his style so that we could then go forward, and do something else.
So it comes down
and
to...
you got to understand, I was just a kid
Yeah.
then, I wasn't even 21.
Yeah. It comes down to which microphone and where.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
all that sort of stuff.
I remember in the first Tim Buckley dates, the first time Paul walked in the room, he came in and he walked around to see where every microphone was, what it was, where it was placed, how high it was, how low it was. He questioned everything I did, but he didn't do it with a point that, I don't trust you. That was never in the equation. Jac, when I worked with him as a producer, he really concentrated more on the song and getting the performance, and getting it very quickly. Jac worked extremely quickly, whereupon Paul would analyze it a little bit more and keep going and going and going until he got the performance that he heard in his head. It doesn't mean that he didn't hear it earlier on, but there was always a chance of getting it better. Jac would be the one, okay, that's good, let's go, which is very similar to the way I am too. You know when it's right, and you just go with it. That's not a put down to Paul at all, because I admired him greatly and he was a dear friend. But let me think how many albums I made with Jac where he actually produced. Possibly only 2. I'm trying to think what the second one was. I remember he did a horoscope album, and I had wanted to do it, and he wound up doing it over at United Recorders with, I think, Lanky Lindstrom or somebody else. Jac will remember. And he asked for a list of microphones and a way to do it, so that, because he needed a bigger room, because he had a bigger orchestra and a whole different kind of thing. And I think Cyrus Farr was the narrator. Out of this whole thing of meeting Jac, I met he brought Paul to me, and through that, I met all the Love and Spoonful people. It just, everybody came into my life, and it came directly from Jac, because, Jac Nitzsche, on, and then into Jac, and then everything started to flow forward. But I'm just going to ramble a little bit. I think it's probably the best thing to do. because I don't remember everything in detail. I remember when the first Doors album happened, and we recorded that whole album in 7 days, which is almost unheard of, except for the last Doors album, which we recorded in 10 days. Jac rushed out from New York the night after we did The End, where Morrison, I don't know if you've heard this story, where Morrison took acid, and there was a little TV on a chair, and he was in the studio and the band was playing and he was singing, and at the end of the recording he went across the street to the Blessed Sacrament Church and was reading, little testaments and little things, and somehow or another the acid really kicked in, and he started seeing lots of things. He went back over to the studio. We had all gone home, and he'd forgotten. He had jumped over the fence, broken into the studio, had hosed the place down with a fire extinguisher and stuff like that. And it was a pretty big mess, but nothing really got damaged. The next morning we came in, and I had gotten a phone call from Tutti Camerata, the owner, and said, "Get down here, because what's going on?" And Jac flew out from New York and calmed that whole thing down.